Hello and welcome back to Overanalyzed, a show where I completely overanalyze and overinterpret things. Today we are gonna have a look on the Spongebob episode, The Nasty Patty. The episode is about Spongebob and Mr. Krabs thinking they've killed a health inspector and have to bury his alleged corpse. The episode starts with a suspenseful tone and goes right into the narration of the character called Frenchie, who is spoken by Tom Kenny, who introduces the viewer into the story. After that we see the health inspector for the first time and then skip to Mr. Krabs, who panics because he smells him. Soon Spongebob and Mr. Krabs start to serve him the menu to help him fulfill his duty and to save their restaurant. After the meal, the inspector demands a Krabby Patty to end his observation. Both characters are now in relief to only then find out there's a fake health inspector who tests the restaurant in order to obtain free food. Mr. Krabs thinks this inspector is the fake one and decides to take revenge. And he and Spongebob create a disgusting burger which could lead to strong food poisoning. No, I want to take a moment to remind you that Mr. Krabs evidently knows the smell of a real health inspector and thus could have known that the man who is sitting in the restaurant right now is a real one, but whatever. Now the real story starts. They bring him the burger and as soon as he wants to take a bite, a fly flies into his mouth and the inspector starts to choke. Spongebob and Mr. Krabs think he tried the burger and is now obviously fighting for his life. Nevertheless, they laugh at him hysterically, enjoying the feeling of a victory. After that, they find out that the fake inspector has been caught and they are now in charge of an alleged corpse. This is where the phases of grief kick in. First, Krabs experiences the first phases, denial and anger, and accuses Spongebob of killing the inspector. Then he experiences the third phase, bargaining. In the end, Spongebob gets into a depression, the fourth phase, and then accepts his fate, the fifth phase. In the end, Mr. Krabs keeps a clear mind and decides they should bury his corpse. Now I want to take a moment and talk about how the mood of the episode drastically changes. The weather, the music, all is more depressing. The episode turns into a film noir. After burying the still alive health inspector, Spongebob wants to say some kind words about him, to honor him. But Mr. Krabs keeps kind of cold-blooded. This shows that Mr. Krabs' greed is indeed so big he would go over bodies. After that they get noticed by the police and this is my most favorite part of this episode. The police officers joke about how they have to arrest the two because they are not in the Krusty Krab serving delicious Krabby Patties. Notice how Mr. Krabs' reputation is so good, both police officers don't even think about what the two are doing with a muddy shovel in the middle of nowhere on a rainy night. They tell them to put the shovel in the back and they give them a ride back. At the back of the car, the body of the health inspector appears at Spongebob's feet because the rain washed away the mud. They decide to put the body in the trunk of the police car. I'd like to point out the perspective of this scene. The camera is in the trunk of the car. You could compare it to the famous trunk shot from Quentin Tarantino. In the car, the music has turned to a suspenseful jazz tune. Mr. Krabs tells Spongebob to store the body in the freezer so the cops can't find it when they come back. Back at the Krusty Krab, Spongebob tries to get the body in the freezer, but the outside door is locked. Notice how everything looks so dark, depressive and rusty. Spongebob sees no other way but to hide the body under his cap and so get access to the freezer. Even this doesn't make the cops suspicious, not until the female officer demands some ice and tries to get it herself. Mr. Krabs and Spongebob confess. It turns out that the health inspector isn't in the freezer, but somehow got outside and then gets beaten by the cops because they thought he's a zombie. That means they believed Spongebob and Mr. Krabs that they killed someone, but that someone turned somehow into a zombie and they still didn't arrest them. This story ends with a happy ending, but the episode itself is one hell of a ride. For me, this is a prime example of how good and unique the older episodes of SpongeBob were. For more, subscribe and like the video. Goodbye.
Rice! Well, not really.
Oh boy, I'd like a Krabby Patty.